Grab a cold beverage, listeners. You're going to get thirsty when you listen to this episode.
Yes. Remember when we visited Tucson, Arizona back in the day, and they told us, even if we didn't think we were thirsty, to always carry a bottle of water because you don't really sweat in the desert, just it dries. And then the next thing you know, it's like, I need a drink.
Yeah,
of
it's
water.
a hot, dry climate. Ugh. Yeah, they also advised that when I visited Colorado with the garden bloggers, they would just overload us with water because you don't know you're thirsty till it's too late.
Yes. So today I am drinking tea. It's iced tea.
Me too.
But after our tea episode, speaking of drinks, one of our listeners, Jenna in Georgia, wrote and said her favorite tea was from a family-owned business in Alabama called Piper and Leaf.
Yes, I saw that.
So my order should arrive today.
What did you buy?
I'll call them dessert teas. There's chocolate tea, which has some chocolate in it, apparently. Old-fashioned birthday cake. And then the other one, not really a dessert tea, but healing honeysuckle, which just sounded smooth.
Ooh, you're making me hungry. We better get on with the episode.
All right, I'll get us started. Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on several acres out in the country.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and often the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Dee. You can tell that spring's getting closer because our little updates are starting to grow in length.
Yours is really long this week. How about you tell us about it?
Well, on Tuesday of last week, they had hyacinths on vase at Aldi. So I bought 3, pink, blue, and white. Yep. They are all in full bloom out in the kitchen. They are wonderful. We had some great weather on Wednesday, so I trimmed back the epimediums, some grasses, a few flower stalks on some heuchera. And then Thursday was rainy, which is fine because I went out to Brownsburg, which is it's not far, but it's not near either. Spoke to a group called the Friendly Garden Club.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people who have written me and said, could you come speak? And I've said, no, I'm not speaking in 2023. This club arranged for me to speak like 15 months ago before I decided I was taking the year off. So they're a lovely group. Then Friday we had cold and there were some snow flurries out there. So we had literally like spring, summerish, winter. We had every season almost.
We did too. I'm tired of it. I'm ready for it to settle down, but I know it's going to be a few more weeks.
Yes. And then I went to the garden center on Saturday and I deserve a pat on the back because I didn't buy any houseplants and I could have easily bought some houseplants.
Well, I'm impressed.
But I did buy wheatgrass seeds and my little egg people. I'm practicing sowing those. And so I sowed a few to see how long they're going to be to germinate. And then I sowed seeds for onions, lavender, plus from All American Selections, I got a petunia. I think it's Carmine something or other. I should have looked that up. And then I got the Snapdragon and I started seeds from those. Got some more microgreens started. And I might quit talking about those because people know I'm sowing and eating them regularly. Anyway, big week of gardening, sort of.
The only person who ate any microgreens here was Masha. So I gave up unless I'm going to do them in the greenhouse. And right now in my garden, the greenhouse space is a premium. So we won't be doing microgreens out in the greenhouse right now. Instead,
speaking of that, I want to move my microgreen setup into the kitchen somehow and put it in lights there because I actually need the space for starting seeds in a couple of weeks.
I understand that. So I realized yesterday that I hadn't planted my Snapdragon seeds, and we have the ones from the All American Selections called Double Shot Orange Bicolor. And I have another variety from Select Seeds called Rocket Orchid. And I planted those. Those are the tiniest seeds I've ever dealt with.
They are the tiniest seeds.
Tinier than poppy seeds, which is really saying something.
Tiny.
And then I also got out some big seeds, nasturtiums, and it was Bloody Mary. And I planted those after I soaked, and I'm saying this so that people will know to do it. I soaked my recycled containers in a 10% bleach solution.
I saw that on the Instagram. I saw you do that.
So it's on my Instagram stories if people get to them. And then maybe I'll make that a highlight, and then that way it'll stay on there. Should. It's kind of important. And I'm soaking my sweet pea seeds, not sweet potted peas that you eat, sweet peas that you don't eat that smell good. I'm soaking them right now, and I'm going to go plant them as soon as we're done. And then it's that time of year where there's just not enough of me to go around,
That's right.
Because I sprayed neem oil for a second time in the greenhouse. I am happy to report that the coleus I sprayed neem oil on, it worked like a charm.
Cool.
To kill the mealy bugs. It really worked. And then I sprayed it on the stupid citrus trees, which, by the way, that orange tree that I want to get rid of, it burst into full bloom.
Ha, 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 ha.
I think it's on its last gasp, and that's why it did it.
It sensed the negative vibes, and it said to itself, I'm going to show that Dee. She can't throw me out while I'm in full bloom. I am going to bloom like nobody's business. And so my life depends on it.
Yeah, it's still going. And then
wait a minute. When you say it's still going, you don't mean it's still going as in flowering. You mean it's still going out of your garden.
I mean both. It's going out the door, and it is still in flower. It does smell good. I'll say that, but it's got bugs on the blossoms, and not good bugs. And it's gross. It needs to go. And I realized I don't really eat oranges. So why do I have an orange tree?
Because why not?
Anyway, I also watered everyone this week, and I want to tell people I hand spray. Like, this isn't a big sprayer in the greenhouse. I'm just hand spraying the few plants that are in bad shape. It's getting warmer, and the greenhouse plants are starting to dry out more and dry out faster. And so did that, and I repotted some things. I was very busy.
See, I am exhausted just after our updates. We should pat ourselves on the back. We've got it going on.
Yeah, we better move on to the quote.
Life is defined by time and seasons. Summer brings sunshine, warm and flowering. Spring brings warmth and blossoms of flowers. Fall brings the falling of leaves and cool days. Winter brings cold, dry, harsh weather, and trees are without leaves. Layla Gifty Akita.
Okay. And you like this one because
sometimes a week is defined by seasons. Like this last week, I think we had a little spring, almost summer, winter, fall. We had it all.
Yeah. It's going to be very warm here today. And then I think in 2 days, it's going to be really chilly again. So have you noticed, I mean, this is an actual phenomenon from, weather. When the weather is going to get bad, there's a surge of heat first, and there's a really warm day, and then it goes down. I heard that from a meteorologist, and I was like, yeah, that's true usually.
It is. And so today you can see out my window, it is sunny. And then tomorrow it's going to be rainy, but 68, which is very unusual for February. And then Thursday we're back to kind of cold. So who knows? Yes.
And all these weather extremes. It has been a really warm winter in Oklahoma this year, other than these huge cold snaps we've gotten. And the lavender, some of it isn't very happy. We'll see. Though it was the newer lavender. It's always the newer plants or the really old plants that get clobbered by these extremes. But let's talk about something happy. Flowers.
Yes. And lavender does like drier conditions. Yes, and the reason we told everybody get a drink of water is because our theme this week is about dry gardens. And so you might psychologically have to keep drinking water.
No kidding. And I have a cold, so if I cough, everybody, sorry, just going to have to bear with it. All right. So what should you grow in dry spots in the garden? What do you think?
I think, well, the first things that comes to mind are things like succulents, sedums, and I think about rock garden plants.
Yep.
And I joke because one of the slides that I show when I go out to speak, and I was reminded of it because it popped up, is I'll have seedlings show up in the patio, like viola seedlings and petunias, and they're literally growing in sand in between the pavers.
Yeah.
And so, we think plants need a lot of water, and they do. You shouldn't put your petunias and violas in a container and never water them. But plants they're tough, and they adapt to dry climates.
They do. And my garden paths make great seed beds. I mean, they really do.
Which reminds us, and you're going to talk about Beth Chatto's garden in England. She's a very famous English gardener/garden writer. She has passed away.
Right.
But she planted stuff without watering it. And if it survived, she was happy. If not, you moved on to the next plant. And a lot of her plantings were in gravel. And you saw this garden, did you not?
I did. I saw this garden. Yeah. And the best part of the garden, I mean, it's a pretty big garden and they have a cafe. It's very nice. But the part of the garden that is the most famous is the gravel garden, which used to be her driveway. And so she decided that she was tired of watering. You and I read a book by her and Christopher Lloyd where they wrote letters back and forth to each other. And
yes.
It was during that time that she started that gravel garden. The thing about Beth is that she changed how people gardened in England. Up until then, they were used to, the area that she lives in, which is East Anglia or lived in, is East Anglia. And East Anglia is drier than, say, other parts of England. Because people have this idea that England's all, rain, rain, rain. And that's not true. In East Anglia, it's not. So she planted all kinds of things. But I will say this, some of the stuff that she planted in the gravel garden, I couldn't get away with here because our sunlight is so intense. They have very long days in the summer of sunlight, and it's very dark in the winter because of where they are in the world, right? I mean, the sun doesn't set till 11 p.m. midsummer.
And the sun is not intense all day.
That's right.
Like it is
in
Oklahoma.
So they have this beautiful, I mean, that's why their plants grow so beautifully tall, is that they have beautiful sunlight that doesn't attack everything. Here we call it the death orb. So there's a big difference. I will say there are a lot of plants that we think wouldn't do well in a dry garden. And I'll tell you one, Phlox paniculata. You do have to water it here, but you don't have to water it as much as you think. It'll put up with a lot of abuse, especially the older varieties. I can't speak to the new cultivars. And then you brought up lavender.
And I have lavender growing in a corner of my vegetable garden and some in a few other spots. But the ones back by the vegetable garden, they're by a big rock. They don't get a lot of extra attention or water. And they grow amazingly well. And I do not know the varieties. I bought them from somebody who grew like every lavender variety that she could find up near Muncie, Indiana, which is north and east of me. And I bought them from her as little tiny plants. And she said, basically, the thing with lavender is you do not water it and you do not mulch it, and it will thrive. You have to think about the Mediterranean climate when you're growing that.
Yes. And certain lavenders don't do well in Oklahoma because it's so humid. And I would say that you planting them near your rocks, that gave them reflected sunlight too. And it also made it warmer there, which they like.
Yeah, this is a big rock. I mean, I joked that it fell from outer space, but they literally dug it up when they were digging the foundation for the house, and they kind of pushed it to the back, and that's a whole nother story. But the other plant that does well with very little extra watering and just kind of comes up and does its thing is yarrow.
Yeah, yarrow doesn't love it here. There's a native yarrow, the white one, which
is Achillea the right name for the botanical name?
Yes, it is. And then the white one grows in my upper pasture with no supplemental water at all. That's the one that comes here just naturally. If I leap into action, it's because Masha has decided to mess with my hyacinth vases that are on the table because, because the way she is. Anyway, yarrow's a great plant. I'm trying to think of some other ones that are really good too. I bet our listeners can come up with some.
The other thing too, and I have a lot of sedum that just couple of kinds that I would just call the ground cover sedums. One of them I think is called blue spruce or spruce, and that's got a grayish cast to the I call them leaves. They're fleshy things. That stuff comes up everywhere, and then I just pull it out where I don't want it. But it's very pretty. It has yellow flowers, and Dee has just gotten up to go get that cat away from the vases. Unceremoniously tossed her to the ground. Well,
yeah, she had to go because those are 3 of my favorite vases, and she cannot break them. Which she did break one once, so we aren't going to go into
the other thing I want to talk about, and I'll tie this. When you look at woodland wildflowers and some of the bulbs that we grow, a lot of the bulbs that we grow are actually from Mediterranean climates. And so you don't want to have a lot of water in the summer because that'll rot those bulbs out. And if you think about woodland flowers, during the summer, they don't get as much rain down at their roots because they're in the middle of the woods, which a lot of there's a lot of tree roots and things that are sucking them dry.
Well, and also the water leaves deflect the rain. So they just don't get much. They do get all of that great, wonderful soil from all the leaves that fall in the winter, but they don't get much in the summer. So something to think about when you plant bulbs too is don't overwater them in the summer. They hate it, especially daffodils. I can think of a bunch of them. A lot of the hyacinths.
I just posted another picture on Instagram of the crocuses in the lawn because why not? But I tell people when I tell them how I did that, if you have an irrigation system and you're, be like one of my neighbors that I'm not going to, and just pump water on there to where you almost have a swamp in the summer so that your grass is green, that will kill off. I think that will rot out those bulbs. And so I don't supplement a water back in the backyard. It just fine.
It'll kill your trees too. That's one of the biggest problems they've found with trees in lawns and shade lawns, because those are what get watered in Oklahoma the most is fescue. If you water too much, you can damage your trees.
So too much water is a bad thing. And there's a point to all this talk about dry gardens. But do the next quote and let's talk about vegetables.
It's so dry, the trees are bribing the dogs. Author Charles Martin.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. It
gets that dry here.
It can. And I don't want to speak to I'm going to sound like an old lady gardener. Well, I remember the drought of 12. It was terrible.
I think I was there in the drought of 12. Was that when
you were here
in Riders? Yeah.
We had the pre-drought in 11 and then the full drought in 12. So it was pretty dry.
2011 here was a nightmare, but then 2012 was okay. I think all the water went down below you guys. But yes, I remember y'all's gardens in 2012. It wasn't your best year.
No.
Last year wasn't our best year because it got hot and dry here then too. So you have on here under vegetables, why Dee uses drip irrigation in her garden and why they probably do in Arizona. Well,
yeah. The thing is, when everything you read about vegetable gardening and everything I write, it's like, how much water did tomatoes need? About an inch a week. How much, so about an inch a week. And so if you're gardening in Oklahoma, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Southern California, you're not getting an inch of water a week. So you have to figure out, if you're going to grow vegetables, how to supplement. And you did that.
Right. And I use drip because it's more efficient. It just is. And then I don't have to worry about watering it. And also you'll have less foliar diseases, leaf diseases if you use drip irrigation, because you aren't splashing water and soil on the leaves all the time. And there's a lot of reasons. So I wrote an article for Oklahoma Living called Hard to Garden. And actually, the Horticulture Society has asked me to come speak on it, which I think is funny because I'm not sure how to speak on that, but I'll figure it out. It is hard to garden here. And then one of our listeners, who's a friend of ours, wrote and said, it's hard to grow garden everywhere, Dee. And I said, no, I don't think everybody feels that way. I think there are some places that are a little easier.
I think for the most part, Indiana is easier than Oklahoma because we do tend to get rain. In a normal summer, we do tend to get rain about when we need it. Now, we had a really dry fall, and I don't remember a fall quite as dry as the one that we had. And that kind of caught people off guard because round about Labor Day, people are like shutting it down and nobody thinks of hauling their sprinklers out and watering and stuff. But sometimes you do have to in the fall. But I don't think Indiana's all that hard, but I'm used to it.
And I also think Texas is hard. I suspect Kansas is hard. I think you guys don't have as many bugs as we do down here. Lots of bugs. Oh gosh, so many bugs. But you know what? It is, you have to learn for your particular climate. And then, okay, so you have in here about how so the whole full sun tag thing, we talk about this a lot in Oklahoma. If it says that it needs partial sun, you're going to plant it in the shade here because it's hot and dry. If it says full sun, it depends on the plant. And you need to study the plants when you're in the store and not really trust those tags, because a lot of what is, grown might have been tested, say, in Minnesota. Bailey Nurseries is up there. They do a lot of the hydrangeas for the United States, and they test them up there. Now, they're grown in more local places. Like some of ours are grown up by Tahlequah, which is sort of up by Tulsa. But here's the thing. That's very different than Altus, Oklahoma. And southern Indiana is very different than northern Indiana, right?
Yeah, they're about a zone different. And the thing I would say is the sweet spot for many of these things that call for full sun in climates like yours is if you can give them morning sun and filtered shade in the afternoon. That's kind of the sweet spot because you're just protecting them from the, as you say, what do you call that? The fiery orb?
The death orb.
The death orb. I couldn't think.
You're protecting them from afternoon sunlight. So I always tell people when I go to Garden Coach, I say, okay, the best side of your house is the east side. That's your morning sun side. And so you plant all of the finicky stuff there. And then you can plant other stuff in other parts. And then I help them work on those. So it depends on the plant. I mean, if it's a salvia, you're welcome to plant it on the west side or the south side, as long as you've got water. But, certain plants like roses, hydrangeas, et cetera, you want to plant those on the east side and certain hydrangeas on the north side. But I digress.
Yeah, you do digress because we're talking about vegetable gardens.
Oh.
So if you could put a vegetable garden on the east side of your house where it would get some afternoon shade when you're in a very hot location. Now mine's out in the back, in the middle of the not the middle of the backyard, but the back third of the backyard. It gets full sun pretty much all day. But I've noticed that, there's a fence around it. So it does get a little bit of a shade at times.
Mine's in full sun. I'm not going to lie. My vegetable garden's in full sun, both of them. The pots that go down the middle of the driveway are in full sun. And the one, there's one bed that gets a little bit of shade because here's the thing. They're annuals, most of those vegetables. And I'm growing stuff like peppers and, garlic will be finishing up when it gets hot. I mean, it's not hot here all the time. But we're going to talk about Arizona in a minute, and that's a whole different thing. So my vegetables are grown in full sun. Tomatoes, peppers, things like that, eggplant, all of that can handle full sun as long as it has water.
As long as it has water. Now, we should tell our listeners, and you've talked before, that setting up drip irrigation, there is a investment of money up front because you have to buy all the components.
Sure. And a lot of times you have to hire someone to do it for you if it's a big garden.
You can't set it and leave it because you have to check your emitters to make sure that they're not clogged up. You got to make sure your timers are working properly. And because several times last summer, I'll remind you, you would say the stupid timer stopped working and something didn't get watered while you were gone or
I had a bad timer. And that's the thing about those timers. Even though you bring them in the winter, I mean, they're just not made that well. They're made in my favorite country. And so
planned obsolescence, we call it.
Yes, it's planned obsolescence. And so I had a timer that was it was older than 3 seasons, and it had to be replaced. And get this, I replaced it with another timer, and that timer was messed up too. And that was a brand new one. So you need to check them. And in the spring, you have to check the emitters because they're usually full of ants, honestly. Searching for water.
Well, and then we talked about this before. If you have an irrigation system in Indiana, in the fall, you must have it blown out so that it doesn't freeze and crack and ruin. And then in the summer or the spring, they have to come back
and turn
and
it on,
open it up
and blow it out. Yeah.
And then they have to do what's called a backflow test.
Yeah.
To make sure you're not backflowing into the city's water supply. And they have to do a backflow test and then register that with the city of Indianapolis, in my case. And you get a little tag that hangs on your thingy that says it's been tested.
I think they do that here too. I know everybody has backflow regulators on there. I have it on my system too. And I have 3 different systems. And this year I'm replacing my soaker hoses in the cut flower garden. We've already pulled them, and we're going to replace them with Netafim tubing. So, it doesn't matter how you set things up in terms of you're going to have to do some maintenance. It just is what it is. And also, did I tell you that one of my lines froze for the first time?
Yes, you did tell me that.
Yeah. So we had to have it tunneled under the driveway because, of course, that's where it broke, was under the driveway.
Of course.
And so they tunneled under the driveway. It was kind of an expensive fix. So nothing is cheap, as it were.
So let's do the next quote and then move on to the bookshelf. I'm kind of excited about it.
I am really excited about it.
The cactus thrives in the desert while the fern thrives in the wetland. The fool will try to plant them in the same flower box. Vera Nazarian.
How many times have you seen that done, like on Pinterest, where they show like succulents and ferns and all this stuff in one flower box? That's why I thought that was such a great quote, because it's true.
It is. It's crazy what people try to do. So on the bookshelf this week, we have Dry Climate Gardening, Growing Beautiful Sustainable Gardens in Low Water Conditions by Noelle Johnson, who is a friend of ours. She lives in the Phoenix area.
Yes, we love Noelle.
So I sent an email to Noelle and said, hey, Noelle, we're going to talk about your book. And we told the publisher, we said, neither one of us gardens in a dry climate. And they said, would you please talk about the book anyway? Because they thought there would be a few listeners out there in Texas and places.
Yeah, we do have listeners in Texas, so this would definitely apply to them.
And in the book, it's very interesting. I'll have to turn to this page. She has a page where she shows a map of the world and where dry climate gardening is. And so I was really amazed because I should have that page marked instead of thumbing through and making these weird noises.
I don't think you're making any weird noises.
Okay.
I can't hear them.
So it's on page 14 and 15. So I'd say a third of the United States, maybe a fourth of the United States down into Mexico, definitely, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Texas, up into Utah. South America, you think is the Amazon, but there's parts of Brazil that are marked as dry climate. And over on the West Coast, dry climate. Tons of places in Africa. Southern Europe is semi-arid, she says, and Australia obviously has a lot of dry climate, but it's just amazing when you look at the map, how much dry climate gardening there is in the world.
There's a lot of it.
So I said, Noelle, I have some questions for you.
Yeah, because she's an expert.
So she wrote here, I printed off the answers, but I don't know the questions anymore because I only printed her answers.
Oh, well, I'll help you. I'll help you with the questions. You said that you see that she grew up in Southern California. And so you asked about...
Oh, I do have the questions here.
You do have them? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I
can see them right here.
What is the best thing about dry climate gardening? And she said, it's the ability to explore a plant palette of plants that are slightly different than those commonly grown in more temperate regions. Cacti and other succulents have with their unique shapes, along with plants with varying shades of green tinged with gray, and the fact that they have fewer insect pests due to our arid climate.
Yes, they don't have the issue with insects that I do,
but they have scorpions. They have scorpions.
Yes, they do have scorpions, but that's That's just part of it. They're used to scorpions and snakes and things.
Yeah, because remember when we were in Tucson, they said shake your shoes out in the morning to make sure a scorpion didn't crawl into it.
Okay, so I'm going to make a confession. In Oklahoma, in the country, we do that anyway because we get scorpions too.
Oh, ooh, okay. My next question is, okay, tell the truth. Do you ever envy gardeners who have the traditional 4 seasons like moi? When you see all those pictures of snowdrops like mine and crocuses like mine in bloom every spring on Instagram. And she says,
no.
She says she doesn't. She has a garden filled with blooming plants throughout the entire year. Okay, that's just braggity, brag.
I thought that was awesome because I thought it was the perfect answer because they have very good winters.
Yes, they have they have 2 quote unquote spring seasons. The first spring in March, April, and the second one occurs after the hot summers are over. They rejoice because the heat is abating. Plants put on a new burst of bloom and people get busy in the garden again. So then I wrote, flattery. And I think this part is true. I wrote, we think your book should be given to everyone who moves from the Midwest or any place that isn't a dry climate garden. If they move to Arizona, they should hand them the book at the state line. And I asked her, what's the first thing you do for when people call you for advice? Because she is the Arizona plant lady. And so she has classes online. She does garden consulting. So people do call her. And she says the first thing she tells them is that the dry climate garden is not just cacti and rocks. She says, ditch their hometown plants, dive into the wonderful possibilities that exist in a dry climate filled with drought-tolerant plants, many of which have lush green foliage and a very long bloom season. And so I remember that when we were in Tucson, lush green foliage isn't the first thing I thought of when I thought of Tucson. But someone pointed out to me that many of the leaves are tiny and narrow and grayish in color. And that is because that helps them preserve moisture. Anyway, so one other thing I want to say, I says, what else do you want to say about your book? And then I had a bonus question. She says, I hope that people come away with the reality of what dry climate gardening is. Gardens filled with true beauty that don't need a lot of water.
Well, they are beautiful. We've been to Tucson and we've been to Salt Lake City and
they are very beautiful. Now, the interesting thing in Salt Lake City is Cynthia B. Nelson was working with I forget the name of the water organization, to convince people to stop planting the green lawns and irrigating, and so much water was going into irrigation. And just really helping people understand there are other ways to garden other than, the green lawns of New England and Indiana, and having great success with people that were having beautiful gardens that were more adapted to their climate. And in fact, do you remember we went downtown Salt Lake City and we were at the Mormon Temple Gardens, and it was all exactly what you would expect to see in New England or
it was weird.
Indiana, grasses and everything. Well, they were shutting it down that winter, and they had a 4-year renovation plan, and they were going to completely change it over to be adapted to that exact climate. And so they would greatly reduce the amount of water that they were pumping into the thing. And so that would be interesting. So that was in 2019, 2023. So I wonder if online you can start to see pictures of how they changed that garden.
I bet you can after all of that.
So then I asked Noelle on a follow-up question. I said, do you have a signature plant? Like for me, violas is a signature plant right now. For you, it's I don't know. It was daylilies at one time. It's probably not now, but
it changes in my world.
Her signature plant right now, and it probably changes, is what's called the firecracker penstemon, which is Penstemon etonii. And she says it starts blooming right around January, and by mid-May it's done. But all through January to May, the hummingbirds are all over it. And it tolerates both heat and cold, has beautiful red flowers. And I looked it up.
She sent us a picture and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I looked it up to see, could I grow that in my garden?
Can you?
Well, it's one of those things. It is native to the Western United States, which is a big bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And it says it's hardy to zones 4 through 8, tolerates low water, good for naturalizing in harsh conditions. So I think it would be unhappy here.
It would grow here. In fact, some people who have xeriscape type gardens grow it here.
I mean, we should describe xeriscape.
Xeriscape. I said it wrong.
Xeriscape.
Yeah.
Which is basically dry climate gardening, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. A lot of people thought it was cacti, but it's not necessarily.
So, Dee, we're forging ahead with your cold even. And
sorry.
We go ahead with the next quote. Hey, we're doing good. Our listeners will be happy. They'll be fine. I'll edit out your little coughs and things.
I had to go outside for a little bit. So that's why you had to do that all by yourself. A garden is a grand teacher. It teaches patience and careful watchfulness. It teaches industry and thrift. Above all, it teaches entire trust. Gertrude Jekyll.
That is very interesting, Dee. It does teach.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 pieces of dirt. You found this first dirt, the Montezuma Orchard Project in Montezuma County in Colorado. Go for it.
So this couple, and I don't know if they're married. I don't know. They're partners. A man and a woman met each other, and then they fought fires together throughout Colorado. That's how they met. And then they decided afterwards to start doing this orchard project. They bought an orchard, and it's in Montezuma County. And I learned about this on Cultivating Place podcast. And it was just if you're kind of a garden geek, it's a great episode because he was wonderful to listen to. And we're going to link to the project. And what they do is they get heirloom apples because the Montezuma County, because of where it's located, it's an arid garden area, but it's got some shelter because of the mountains. And so apples grow really well there. And they have a lot of unusual varieties. And he and his wife or partner have started this whole project where they sell a few scions every year. And it was fascinating about so many things. And I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website, and they're in southwestern Colorado, which is why it's dry.
Right.
And it does remind me that Noelle Johnson told me that they grow all kinds of apples in Arizona because they don't have any of the pest problems. No fire blight, no apple scale, none of the pest problems. So they grow beautiful apples with some irrigation, I'm assuming. But
right. But I think they also do dry farming. And so they get really concentrated sugars. So it was fascinating. And he lists a bunch of apples for different things, including ones to make cider and hard cider and other ones that you grow for other reasons. And some for eating out of hand, some for keepers. Anyway, I thought he was fascinating. It was fun to listen to. And their career fighting fires was cool too.
Very nice. So our next piece of dirt is we want to introduce our listeners to the Little Dibby and the Little Dibby XL.
We love
which
them.
Is these great tools. And it's our friends, Sean and Allison McManus of Spoken Garden. And I'm holding up the tool. But this is a great tool, Little Dibby. It's a little dibbler, and it's perfect for sowing seeds and then pricking out little seedlings. There's 2 sizes. I'm holding up extra large. And actually, I think I like the smaller one better.
I have the smaller one here, but I have the extra large one too. Keep going.
But these things, they 3D printed these. And what's nice is the one end is like a little spoon. And you can actually, if you have little tiny seeds, you can put them on the end and it acts as a seed spoon.
Yep.
Or you can use it to prick out little seedlings and transplant them.
That's what I used it for.
The other end of the tool is like a little dibbler, and it's marked off so you can have, you know what, an 1/8, a 1/4, a 1/2, a 3/4, 1 inch. The depth is so you can put it in the soil at the right depth and just make the little holes. And that is wonderful. And so they 3D print these, which is kind of very, very cool.
Yes. And you'll want to hold on to the card because it tells you the measurements of your Dibby. They're fabulous little tools. And I like them because they're plastic.
Now they'll say on their website, this isn't something you're going to like plunge into hard ground or anything. It'll break it but for sowing seedlings and everything that you would do with seedlings where the ground is all loosened up, these are perfect. Here's the other thing cool about these. They won the 2023 National Garden Bureau's Green Thumb Award for innovative new garden tools.
Yeah. And unlike some dibbers, the little scoopy part, we should take a picture of these and have it on our newsletter so people will see what they are. But there's that little scoop. It's solid at the top of it.
Yes.
And sometimes with other things, it's not solid. And so dirt gets up in there and stuff. And this doesn't do that. And because it's plastic, it sheds the potting soil really fast. It's a great little tool. I'm very impressed.
I am impressed too. Now, right now they are selling them on Etsy because they're 3D printing them. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody helps them get these manufactured faster, but they're 3D printing them, each one. And so, like they said, there'll be a few little markings where it detaches from the printer thing. So that is very cool. We're going to include a link to that and hope that people get their own little dibbies because we got these, they sent us samples. And I said, you can buy imperfects or perfects. And I said, I don't care if it's perfect or imperfect, just send it along and you get to choose your own color. And I chose green and you chose blue.
I did. I love mine.
Anyway, that is the Little Dibby by Spoken Garden, Sean and Allison McManus. And great job on something innovative in tools. I'm kind of jealous, really, that I didn't think of it. But I don't have a 3D
And we
printer.
should also say that Sean and Allison, they have a podcast, Spoken Garden, and they're also on Instagram. And they have a website too.
And they have a book.
And a book.
We'll link to all that on probably in the newsletter.
So anyway, so cool. I love this tool. And yes. I don't say that very often.
No. And I'm a kind of a tool fanatic and I don't say that very often either, but these are great. All right. We are ready for another quote. Plants, like people, have their preferences and don't like being thrust into the nearest available hole. Beth Chatto.
So I don't have a rabbit hole this week. I've been sick all week. So I get a pass. Your turn.
Well, I'm cataloging books. I'm almost done. I'm now to the point where I have to do the ones from that don't have an ISBN. So each one has to be looked up. It's
right. It takes time.
The cross stitching is going well. I'm making what they call You're Kidding. So I have a lot of work in progress. Lost Ladies of Garden Writing. I found a few more when I was cataloging books. But what really I've been looking at too much is, do you know what a nemophilist is?
I do not.
So a nemophilist, and I misspelled that. Let me correct the spelling. It's one who is fond of the forest or forest scenery, a haunter of the woods.
Do you have to haunt the woods to like them?
No, I think maybe haunter in the sense of going to the woods.
Often. Yeah, got it.
Yes. So I've been looking at YouTubes and Instagrams of somebody who calls himself the urban nemophilist. And he creates these little terrarium scenes that look like, you've plucked a little corner of the woods and stuck it in there with mosses and little ferns and plants. And they're very cool. And it's got me thinking that I need to make a little tiny terrarium or two, of course.
Oh, I'm looking at his Instagram right now.
So the funny thing was when I first started looking at it, so he has horticultural charcoal. And I have some that's real granular, but he has some that are like little bricks, like an inch brick. And he puts those into because they help absorb like odors and things.
Right.
Well, he's picking one up and I thought, that's got little bugs on it. Does he know that has little bugs on it? And that is on purpose. They put little springtails, and I've seen some where they put little roly-polies in the little terrarium because they help clean up a lot of the debris and keep the ecosystem going.
Well, that makes sense because that's what roly-polies do. Sow bugs.
Yeah. So I'm eyeing the moss outside and I'm thinking, where does one get springtails? They're out there. They're tiny, tiny little insects. I know where I could get roly-polies, but anyway, and I have this one really weird houseplant called Syningia. And I bought it last spring. The thing is like almost died and come back, almost died and come back. And it's got a pretty big root structure. I think it's almost like a tuber that it's growing out of. Had one leaf, and I thought, I'm just not keeping that moist enough. So I looked up and it needs to be moist. And I have a little tiny glass container now, and I potted it up as best I could with a little bit of charcoal and rocks. And so I have it growing in there. So I'm anxious to see if it just completely dies on me or actually grows well. And if it does, I might do something with mosses outside. I don't know. Anyway, they're fascinating.
Well, you did fall into a rabbit hole. It's a good thing.
I didn't have anything else going on. Why not?
No, nothing at all.
So speaking of nothing going on, how about garden commissions for next week, Dee?
Oh, I'll be planting more seeds this week. I'm probably going to start my zinnias because I want to. I mean, it's a little early still, but I don't care. I'm going to start them, I think. And I need to buy some more potting soil, and I plan to work outside on Friday if it's not too cold. I've got something going on the rest of this week, so I can't go out, which is a bummer because today is beautiful.
So yesterday was beautiful here. Today is pretty nice, but it's only going to get in the low 40s or the high 40s, maybe. I'm going to tend some seeds that I've already sown, just make sure that they stay moist and everything. Right. I don't think there's a lot of great weather coming up. I've got rain coming in tomorrow, followed by colder temperatures. I do have to write an article on how to grow lavender for Family Handyman and shrubs for the sun. So I'll do that research. But I did have a question for you. I've got some verbena seeds from All America Selections, and they're a perennial verbena, I'm pretty sure. Do you think I should go ahead and start those seeds now?
Aren't they kind of slow? Aren't verbenas slow?
They are. And I think what I'm going to do is I'll plant some inside, and I think I'll winter sow some, although it's getting late, but I'll throw some outside in a winter sow.
To winter sow. Where you live, although here we're getting a little low. What kind of verbena is it?
It's the one that she sent, and we are lazy podcasters. I did not look it up, but I will put a link to whichever one it is. It's one of those dwarfer ones.
But it's not a trailing type.
No.
Yeah, we mostly grow the trailing ones here.
It's not. It's a perennial. And so now you're making me look it up real quick. It'll just take a second here. If I can get to the All American Selections in a hurry.
She needs to look up All American Selections verbena, and maybe it'll show up. Maybe it won't.
Well, thank you for the tips on doing a search. I'm new to this computer stuff, and I did not know that, Dee.
I'm telling the other people, not you.
It's Verbena bonariensis, and the variety is Vanity.
Oh, yeah. You can start that now. I wouldn't even worry about it. Seriously.
I think I should start it. And after I got done sowing seeds on Sunday, I thought, I should have probably done that verbena. I'm going to do half winter sow and half inside.
So I didn't know it was Brazilian verbena, which is a whole different thing. So that verbena, it likes heat. So just make sure you give it some heat. I put it on a heating pad.
I do. That sounds like work to get that set up, but I guess I could.
Oh my goodness. You can do it. The nice thing is once it's up, it's pretty easy. I grew the Verbena bonariensis from Nanandra last year out in the greenhouse. It did great.
I think I might winter sow these.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Well, that is it for this week's episode, I think. You got anything else, Dee?
I'm done.
Thank you for listening to The Gardenangelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Gardenangelists, at substack.com, also linked to in our show notes.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links, or you can make a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or a one-time donation through PayPal. If you buy something after clicking through on an affiliate link, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate this week. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.